It may seem a little bit late to be posing this question, but just what is this story that we have been immersing ourselves in and which has been shaping our worship these last few months? We joined the story from the Old Testament, part of which we've heard read this morning, early on in what, with good Scottish persistence, we continue to call summer despite all the evidence. We read about Abraham, and we have followed the story as it has progressed through the generations and the centuries, from Sarah and Abraham, through Rebekah and Isaac, to Jacob and Rachel and Joseph, then skipping many generations till the story was rejoined with Moses. It is a story of movement and migration, of hardship and blessing, of trouble and the resolution of trouble. So is it history? I've been saying fairly consistently that it's not. There are elements in it, of course, which are historical, such as the presence of the Hebrew people in Egypt 1,000 years or so before the time of Christ. But such considerations do not make this story history in the modern sense we use that word. So is it a family story? A kind of saga? Well, to an extent, yes. But while it begins with a family, it grows into something much larger, the story of a whole nation. Is it theology? In parts, yes, it is, because it tells of human exploration of the idea of God. Is it mythology? Certainly, in the sense that myth is story which imaginatively contains and conveys deep truths. Reading little excerpts, the edited highlights, if you like, more or less week by week over 4 months or so, makes it a little bit difficult to take an overview of this whole sweeping narrative. It's a lot to keep in mind all at once. The whole way we study Scripture during worship, I think, makes that hard to do because we focus on 10, 12 verses at a time, just little bits, taking out what we can from them. But today I want to offer you what I think, at least what I think today, this whole story is. I think it's nothing less than an allegory for the whole of life. Now that sounds rather grand, I realize, perhaps a bit ambitious. But if I am right about this, that may go some way to explaining why this story has survived, why it continues to be retold and studied, why it continues to be important to the worship of millions of people in at least 2 religions, 3,000 or so years later, when countless other stories, which must have been told from similar times before and after, have been irretrievably lost. As we take up the story again this week, there are 2 elements which I want to pick out, which we have seen already several times. There's the element of movement. The people are moving by stages through the wilderness, through the desert. It is, I think, interesting to note that the big gap in the story, and it's a gap in the way the Bible presents it, it's not that we've missed out large parts. The big gap in the story between Jacob and his sons settling in Egypt and the beginning of the oppression of the Israelites by the Egyptians, a period of some 400 years or so, is the part where there is no movement, no migration. It seems that if the people were static, there wasn't much to say. And that's something that should make us think. In the life of faith, what place is there for being static? Perhaps not much. Perhaps faith really is about movement. The other element, which I mentioned a little earlier in the service, is the element of complaint. Few of us would think of this as something to be celebrated. Sometimes when I'm preparing for a funeral, the family will tell me that the person who has died never uttered a word of complaint, no matter what they suffered. Not complaining is always seen as a good thing, sometimes a remarkable thing. I'm quite phobic about complaining myself. If I'm in a restaurant, I'd rather eat a badly cooked meal than complain about it. And if somebody I'm with takes the opposite view, I would really rather not be there. But the people in this story had real, deep, genuine cause for complaint. They were almost beyond the point of human endurance. In the desert, where temperatures can reach the high 40s degrees Celsius regularly and occasionally go even higher, and if people were walking and carrying heavy loads, as we must assume they were, then even a few hours without water can be fatal. When they complain that they were dying of thirst, they're not exaggerating. They're not whinging in ingratitude. They're dying. They complain against their leader, Moses. Anyone who's ever been in any kind of leadership position knows that people complaining about you comes with the territory. But Moses is in the same predicament as the people. He doesn't have his own secret supply of water keeping him going. He is dying of thirst too. The story tells of him taking the complaint to God and of God providing water. It's clearly legendary, but it's no less beautiful and meaningful for that. Following a long tradition of renaming places where people in Old Testament times had significant revelations of God, Moses gave the place where the water was given two new names. Massa, from the Hebrew for to put to the test, and Meribah, which means to quarrel or to strive. And the thought which leads him to choose these names is this: the Israelites had been quarreling and testing the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not? Is the Lord among us or not?" Surely this is the central question of faith. A people on the very edge of dying by thirst would well ask it. They'd felt abandoned. But who wouldn't ask this question? I suppose that not many of us have ever faced such extreme conditions of threat to life, but some I know have. Last week, for example, when we had with us members of the Royal British Legion, I caught a glimpse of some of the names on some of the medals that they were wearing. Among them, the names of Iraq and Kosovo, places known to me and to all of us, I suppose mostly through news reports, but places where these men from our community faced death. I'm sure some will have asked, is God here? Or is he not? Some I know of our more senior members of this congregation have seen war come to this island. Was God there during the Blitz in London or Clydebank? Or was he not? Most of us probably have in some form or another faced our own deep crises. Receiving news of a serious diagnosis, by the deathbed of someone we cannot imagine being without, as a relationship intended for life broke up, as at times we have felt terribly and utterly alone, sometimes even as others have been around us. Is God among us or not? This is a question which is neither easily nor lightly answered. Any attempts to do so are at best glib, at worst fatuous. In the ritual of striking the rock and the flowing of water, the story offers some kind of answer. But I feel compelled to suggest that it is not definitive. And my reason for saying that is rooted in the story itself. Because as we have already heard, as we have noted, this is not the first complaint uttered by the people against God in this story. And it is not the first story of complaint where the complaint has been answered by divine provision. The Israelites had complained that they were about to be annihilated by Pharaoh's horsemen and charioteers. They had complained of starvation. They had already, on another occasion, complained of terrible thirst. On each occasion, the story tells us that God intervened, parting the sea, providing quail in the evening and manna in the morning, making brackish water pure, now opening a stream from a rock in the desert. Would not just one of these interventions have been enough to answer the question, is God among us or not? No. Because life isn't like that. That's why I said this story is an allegory of life itself, for it shows a constant movement of struggle and ease, adversity and success, heartache and celebration, hardship and relief, anxiety and calm, terror and peace, questioning and answering. And I think that's why this story has been told and retold, because although it is about people long ago and far away, it is also about us here, now. It's about what it is to be human, to be in this thing of infinite complexity which we call life, to wonder if this is all there is, to wonder if any of it has meaning, to ask, are we absolutely, utterly, eternally on our own or not? And it is also about the impossibility of definitive answer. And therefore it's about faith. For faith is not a matter of answers, of proof, of certainty. Faith is a way of living in hope without those things, without certainty, without proof, without answers. You see, if we had all the answers, we would have no need of faith, no need for religion, which is the sphere of human endeavor, which gives a home and a shape to faith, which gives us the support and the confidence, because we're doing it together, to live with that deepest of questions. Is the Lord among us or not? And through our common life of prayer and study, of witness and service, through the sharing of experiences of hard times and good times, of times of confidence and times of doubt, to say together, we believe so. We believe the Lord is among us. That is our faith. Amen.